as with any change, adjusting always takes a little bit of time. And I think living in a foreign country, and especially this is my first time living in a developing country, there are a lot of challenges in the adjusting. I had a little bit of a challenge in my first 6 months because I found out in, I guess it was the first week of June, that I had problems with my gallbladder. They did an ultrasound and found 10 stones in my gallbladder, and I needed to have surgery. And the doctor said that perhaps living here sort of complicated or accelerated this process of these stones. But it also made my adjusting much harder. Basically, my health has improved quite a bit since my operation, and I've gone through just normal adjustments. I think that the biggest adjustment has been the adjusting to the different culture. And of course, as gringas, we really stand out, the people with white-colored skin. And of course, I'm blonde, so I'm light in that aspect too, of course, compared to here. So there's sort of these obvious cultural differences. I look really different. And that's taken some getting used to. Being treated differently because of the color of my skin and the color of my hair has taken a little bit of getting used to too. That shows itself in different circles, I suppose, that shows itself more than at other times. There are some obvious cultural things, like also that the music is maybe different, some of the food is different. There's, I think, a stronger cultural identity here than what we have in Canada, because of course Canada is a mix of many different cultures. But there's a very strong sense of the culture that comes through with the dances, with the traditions, with days off, and the reasons for all of these things. What I'm experiencing now, that was sort of in the first year, what I'm experiencing now is sort of a deeper level of cultural difference. Women's role here is quite traditional. Another level of the cultural difference, I would say, that I've experienced is sort of this class system. There's a really strong sense of class system. So if someone's skin is really much darker, then that means that maybe they're from the countryside and haven't had as much education. And there's sort of this cultural understanding or awareness that is perpetuated that by the color of someone's skin, it means that there's sort of this assumption that people aren't as well educated or haven't had very good opportunities, or maybe don't have as much money, or also that maybe they shouldn't either. And for us, at least for me, in living in Canada, we haven't had the same sense of cultural distinction in a sense where it would actually limit people's opportunities, maybe as what it would here. So I think now that I've been here for a little bit longer, these are some of the other subtle and not so subtle cultural differences that are showing themselves. And as a pastor, as a woman in ministry, some of these other challenges have sort of presented themselves. Because I think that I'm a fairly open-minded person and very typical of my culture. Many Peruvians are known to be very machistic, very sexist in the roles that women and men play, the types of jobs that women are allowed to have or not allowed to have. There are women who are working, but I would say that it's not always widely accepted. In terms of my pastoral role anyway, we are supposed to be preaching gospel. And so in this kind of context, when a woman is being discriminated against for a job just because she's a woman, what does the gospel tell us? What would Jesus have to say about that? In terms of women who are living in abusive relationships and living in a society that maybe doesn't always support women being single mothers, or in a society that doesn't always support divorce, what does the Word of God have to say to these women? Do they stay in these abusive relationships and because the society says that maybe they shouldn't be divorced? I think that we are all a product of our culture. And to say that I could maybe separate out what's my cultural difference, what's my faith telling me, teaching me from my own cultural understandings, I think is almost impossible, because that has made up, I said to somebody the other day that it's almost like the blood that runs through our veins. So much of who we are is because of our culture. Not only our theological understandings, but many of our theological understandings are a result of our cultural understandings too. But I should also probably talk more specifically about how the differences impact our faith journey. And for instance, the institutional structures are not as well formed here. And so there's a lot of paperwork and time needed to accomplish some of the simplest of tasks. But people do this knowing that eventually something will happen. This says a lot about the patience and faith of a people, I think. And one of the best examples I can think of is that I was at the post office a few weeks ago before Christmas, and I waited in about 5 different lines to receive one package. And during these 5 lines, the wait in each of these lines took about 2.5 hours of my time. However, this isn't the first time this has happened. I went there knowing that I would get the parcel eventually. I think the interesting thing is that if this were to have happened in Canada, we'd be complaining to the highest authority, and we wouldn't put up with all the red tape and the bureaucracy and needing to wait so long. The impact on our faith journey is that I feel the Peruvians are an Advent people. And so we can learn something about this cultural difference. What it is like to wait with expectant, active, participatory patience, knowing and trusting that God's Son will return in glory one day. And to me, this is a huge and wonderful difference. I've learned a lot about patience and about waiting.